important.
All right, today we will be evaluating 3 different sample e-portfolios from different different universities online. And does everyone have a copy of the consolidated rubric? Okay, and that is what you will be writing your scores on for each portfolio. And at the end of the session, you will turn them back in to me.
So you want us to do it, you want us to do it on this piece of paper?
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
In terms of writing your answers down and everything. If you need another one, I can pass out another one.
So we should do one for each, or just write it all on one?
Just do like underneath.
Yeah,
I got you.
that's
I
fine.
got you.
Mhm. He just wanted
sorry.
to write everything down to collect data.
Like down here, so if this is Clemson,
Right.
and I think Clemson is 4, I write
Mhm.
Clemson here.
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, just within each subcategory. I mean, he did print out a ton of them, so if you did need another one, you could do that as well.
So we need to do each of these rubrics, even though there's some overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think this is the one though that he consolidated.
Yeah.
To kind of remove some of that overlap we got.
Yes, it's consolidated. It has the other criterion on the back and on the other side as well. Or
Right. I guess I was just asking, because one says critical thinking, one says critical thinking or communication, one says written communication. So
Mhm.
we just do it.
Where, show me where you see the issue.
no problem.
Right on top.
Oh, my computer ever talks to the internet.
I'm going to use my red pen.
I like it.
The very first one will just be for Clemson, and it will give you maybe about 15 minutes to evaluate this first one. And when everyone's ready, just be sure to let me know.
Oh, Drew.
And we're evaluating this as a whole, right? The e-portfolio as a whole. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I'm a verbal grader.
I know, it is quiet time. Thanks.
No problem.
And you'll just be using that form to write down all of your evaluations for each portfolio. So you can kind of put each school under each subcategory and put your scores for each school.
more, but you can just like, you could put Clemson and IUPI. You can just put them where they fall.
Gotcha.
Chantal, would you mind if I started on another one? I started the Clemson one earlier today, so would you
Sure.
want to go to the next one?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And could I give you another sheet?
Sure.
I kind of wrote on this one.
Definitely fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How is everyone else coming along?
Struggling.
Hmm?
Struggling.
Yeah.
I feel like the content of what we're reading
Yeah.
does not have like a clear conclusion, like what is the issue of a, yeah.
It doesn't, it's kind of hard to rate it based on this specific portfolio?
Yes,
Okay, well,
like I said, we can
Then-
finish and see what everybody else
Because
thinks.
I
Yeah.
had a lot of the same thoughts, but.
Yeah,
I'd say then write that on there, cause.
Yeah, I
we
wrote
need
it
to know,
down,
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
I know
every
that's part
report
of the
applies to
discussion that he
every.
wanted on the blackboard too, so.
okay.
I've been fighting with my Wi-Fi, but it's working now, so I will catch up quickly. I'm now that student who's fiddling around with my computer.
We wanted one for like each category, but at the same time, if you can't really measure it up, there's no need, I agree, I wouldn't try to stress it too much at this point, because once we just, like, engage in discussion, we may come up with different points.
Sure.
You're excellent facilitator, Chantal. Thank you.
Thank you. You needed this?
Yeah, this is the overall portfolio, we're not doing it with pieces, right?
Overall.
Hmm. That's a lot.
We're supposed to read every single little sub, click on it, equal book.
I mean, if it's overall, you gotta get a sense of overall, right?
There's one that, this was before one, has 3 months, right?
What did you say? I don't understand math either. It's a silly subject. I don't understand how you write papers. I absolutely don't want to bias any of your decisions, but when you get to Sam's, I think she's probably a very nice girl. Was? Yeah. I mean, this is not biased. No way.
Okay, I think we can, this is unrealistic, y'all.
Yeah.
Our 15 minutes up.
Yes, they are, well, close
No,
enough, I did wanna
struggling.
give Brandy a bit more time also. Did you need any more time?
I've only done one portfolio.
I've only done one component of one portfolio.
Okay, well, let's see how we can facilitate this, because they're also time-wise, I don't wanna go over the limit.
We'll learn from you all, and then
Yeah,
that
no,
helps for
feel
the
free.
next.
I've
Yeah.
done this before with another portfolio, not this, but I've done this similar with the Rubik, so I can pull from that too.
I have
Okay.
no, I have no idea how influence of context and assumptions applies to
No.
the Clemson one, for example, because it's the greatest hits portfolio, there's no context for assumptions.
That's kind of what I wrote. I wrote that, I feel like this is an okay portfolio for interviewing, getting a job, it seemed, you know, but I didn't see any critical analysis, or real critical thought. I mean, there,
In some of his papers, he did underneath of the competencies area.
yeah,
But I'm not gonna sit there and read every single.
Well, are we
And
talking now?
instead
Are
of
we-
competencies,
yes, you
why are
can.
they
Uh-huh.
even with his graphics art disables in the first place?
yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's like 4 different things stuffed into.
I didn't see any citations, I didn't see, you
Not a
know.
one.
But
Yeah.
there is in some
Is
of the
there?
papers, that's why
Yeah,
I'm
so say-
confused, that's where
Okay.
I'm like lost
Right here.
about this comprehensive versus.
Ah,
You
Individual,
dig down
because-
deep into his,
Yeah, it's
So
like
the
underlying-
not the ethics paper, the,
Well, yeah, which one?
where was that link?
That's true, are we evaluating the work in
The
the
natural
portfolio, or are we
sciences.
evaluating the
The-
package?
He said, evaluating it like holistically pretty much, so you're just evaluating the entire collection within the e-portfolio.
One,
I see.
one paper.
So we could have, so we're,
that, and that's where
That
I'm
I found
lost,
this
cause I'm
morning.
like,
if I start turning
Because
from
I
his papers, that's gonna be a totally different story than if I'm evaluating the
right.
Mhm.
how
Yes.
holistic does he wanna get?
So I feel
Yeah,
like
because-
instead of evaluating the whole e-portfolio, if one piece of his e-portfolio
Mm-hmm.
meets that one, can I grade it off of that one?
Well, that's what I did, that's why I'm confused, but like where
Yeah.
it says sources and evidence, I gave him a B. A 3.
And I
Because,
probably, I ranked him lower than that.
right, but because I saw that one paper.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm lost. But if I were to look at the whole thing, I would say, oh no, it's lower because he didn't do it in the majority of the work.
Yeah, of course, I'm thinking about the portfolios of packaging, has it given a whole lot of justification for why all these different bits are in there, and it probably is, someone told me these are the things I need to include.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
But again, with the, okay, am I evaluating that part, or am I reading all of his papers and saying, okay, this is an okay paper, he made a conclusion here?
Mhm.
Okay, so-
I mean,
Whoa.
in the email, he just specified that, that everyone was just evaluating it holistically. Like,
Right.
for an example, the entire collection, so that is somewhat vague in terms of, I'm guessing he's wanting you to evaluate the entire thing and then categorize it, but that would be kind of difficult in a sense to base everything. I would just go with each, if you're having any trouble and you think it would make it easier, I'll take note of that and just write that you all evaluate specific portions of it and just make the notes in your rubric if you find something else that you can specify. And I could give you guys like an extra maybe 5 minutes tops if you all needed that much.
I'm just gonna write all of the thoughts on here, and he can
Yeah.
mire his way through the qualitative data and see what we came up with.
And if you need any more charts, I have some up here if you need some for extra space. Or a loose leaf paper.
I think it's because of the nature of the portfolio. This is not, this is not a discipline-specific portfolio, so,
And personal portfolios are different than,
yeah.
yeah.
So, like, his portfolio is very similar to what our portfolio is going to look like for FFL. So it's gonna be very different, and the content is gonna be very different. So they're gonna have papers in there that are not gonna have
Right.
citations, because
Mm-hmm.
the whole paper is about them, there's no citation needed. So when you're looking at it, in comparison to this rubric, they're not gonna need that, so. I'm curious how Clemson. What are you on the second one? Which one is Clemson? Let's see. You know, me too, we seen ops.
you will find your next one. Can I find another sheet?
Sure.
Yeah, Joyce, to your question, they have a general, it's their e-portfolio program, it's campus-wide, so they have a general website that gives the students the instructions and what pages and what content they have to have for each section.
So the rationale was, someone told me to include all these parts.
Yes, so they have to have an arts and humanity piece, they have to, students should show an example of their best work in each of the following 8 areas: mathematics, natural sciences, social sciences, on and on and on. Yeah, so they have to show an example of each area.
Well, and I feel a little bit weird about evaluating sources and evidence.
You don't have
Because-
a discipline.
It's obvious with some of these papers, they were told that they did not need sources because they don't have any, you know?
Mhm.
So I don't feel like I can rate the student on that when it's obvious that they didn't need them.
True, because like the paper that I'm reading on natural sciences, like I came from a science background, you know, so I'm looking for like nature, science, you know, biological psychologies and all these creditable
It's not-
sources. And for what I'm reading, I've never heard of that in my, 3 years of research, some of these articles. And so,
And I think it was the ethics paper that won an award or something, but there's not a citation in it at all.
I
So-
think, yeah,
That wasn't expected of that student.
I think too, like the difference between, so I'm looking at the difference between the Stony Brook student now and the Clemson student. Regardless, for me, what I'm seeing here is regardless of what the assignment was for the e-portfolio, one is far more sophisticated than the other. But also very different, so what I would say is one's quality is not as high as the other so far, but also the aim and scope is very different.
So you said you don't think, because the competency that he had to meet for the natural sciences, demonstrate scientific literacy
Yeah.
by explaining the
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
of scientific reasoning and applying scientific principles inside and outside the laboratory or field setting. That's the competency that they had to meet.
okay.
Is best addressed by submitting formal laboratory or field studies and papers. Non-experimental research papers may be submitted.
So is this like a lab report that he's doing, or is this
It possibly could be. It could be a lab report or a field study. It may not be an actual paper.
okay.
Yeah. I think the requirements of the e-portfolio, it's just not people have a lot to do with how you evaluate it.
Because the requirements for this specific portfolio may not line up with some of these criteria that are in the rubric.
Yeah,
Because
so-
there's some things that you may not find up here that are in there.
Yeah, so like they were able to submit a lab report, which I haven't looked at this one yet, but it looks like if they were able to submit a lab report, it may not meet, because it's a lab report.
Mhm.
It may not meet some of the, or a field study. It may not actually be an actual formal paper.
I just think it's unfair to go back and say, hey, by the way, you're being evaluated by this, but you didn't know when you were developing it,
There's something that I'm saying for this second one is that I'm viewing it holistically, just as something that is a holistic project. Regardless of what the assignment description was, I see the student has shown me nothing that stands out as fantastic.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only thing I can say with any real sense of clarity.
I'm finding the writing communication one easiest, because obviously they're communicating.
Sure.
regardless.
I always wondered in the sense of with this specific rubric and the variety of different courses that everyone is teaching for, that the portfolios will be used for this specific project, it's always crossed my mind, I don't know, Dr. Schwartzman may know, or you all may know from a research standpoint, you have a lot more experience than I, but I wonder how it would be for everyone to kind of like how we did in your class, Dr. McCall, we kind of made the rubric for our portfolios. I wonder if there'd be some kind of way where maybe we could collaborate in that sense, maybe talk to Dr. Schwartzman and see if there was a way that we could kind of tune this to the kind of portfolios that we're working on, that you all are teaching as well. Because if it's like this for this, then, you know, wouldn't want it to become a little bit more difficult with your classes and this portfolio, and then this rubric as well.
Because the point of this combined rubric was to standardize it regardless of discipline, regardless of prompts, regardless of anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that practical?
It's-
Sorry, apparently
Well,
not.
the AAC&U thinks so.
Yeah,
They've done
they
some
do.
presentations.
That's their,
Right.
yeah.
They want it evaluated holistically, but if you can't answer for specific ones, then if it's not there, it's not there.
Okay,
So.
can I grab another one?
Sure.
But
Jenny
with-
is on a roll.
But with the
I-
AAC&U,
I thought I was just gonna be able to put all three on here, but yeah.
yeah, with the AAC&U, the rubric is supposed to be cross-disciplinary, but it doesn't say that you can only use the rubric to assess it as a whole. Like, there are some campuses that will have that common piece that everybody does in their portfolio, regardless of discipline, and that is the piece that they assess because they know that is going to be the same across the board
Mm-hmm.
because they have a common prompt, and and you would avoid all of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
So-
kind of what, you kind of like pretty much said exactly what I was thinking, but.
Yeah, there's a lot of campuses that do it that way because that's the easiest without creating all this confusion and.
Mhm. So they
Yeah.
just use, so what do they use primarily?
There are some campuses that use, so let's say for instance, even if the e-portfolio is discipline-based, every campus that campus may have one artifact that everyone does across disciplines. So it may just be the about me, or it may be, it may be the introduction to the site, or everyone has to do something about their gen ed course, or about a gen ed course, or a gen ed competency. Everyone has to write a paper about that, but some campuses have a common prompt and that one common page, and they will use that to assess and to utilize
Okay.
the rubric, as opposed to, you take this and we'll go here and.
Right.
Because different portfolios are gonna, they're gonna look differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying for our FFL class, they're not required to use sources in any of their papers. They're required to use sources in their presentations, because they have to do research, but their papers are all reflective. So unless they quote something, or unless they actually went and utilized another source, everything is all about them and what
Yeah.
they're doing. So you're not gonna find any.
Right.
You're not gonna find any sources in there anywhere. So I think that's something that, so like, we use that information literacy piece, and we use that in the presentation process as opposed to the paper process, so, so yeah.
Okay, I made note of that, I'll be sure to let him know that. I think it would be easier for everyone too, in a sense. And were you all ready to look at the next portfolio, or has anyone started? Because if you were, I was going to kind of just click on the next one, because it's for time, it's 10:36. You all wanted to move to the next one?
What was that, Stony Brook?
Yeah.
Yeah, may I have two more?
Sure. And does anyone else need an extra copy?
I also have one.
Here you go.
Write some notes on the other one.
I don't know that the assignment was the same, but I didn't find it as or sophisticated as the third, if you've been to that one. However, as you all mentioned, as you dig a little deeper into it, it gets better. My initial impression was it wasn't fabulous.
I was generous when I was looking at her individual assignments and thinking about those, and concerned about the overall presentation that leads you into those things.
Who are we talking about, I'm sorry?
This is
It's
Sam.
Sam, Stony Brook, okay.
I felt the same way. I think, if I'm looking at it as a whole, holistically, I was not wowed.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in some ways, I had a similar impression of our Clemson student
Yeah.
too,
Mm-hmm.
because I just wasn't wowed. While his site looked, for the most part, better in terms of the overall presentation,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find the work to back up some of the things that would, have given him credit for having fulfilled research.
This is gonna sound very
sources.
snarky, and it will, but I got the sense that he would be hired by a good old boys club. Like, I thought they would look at it and say, dude looks cool.
Looks fun.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't think he'll have a problem finding a job if that's what the purpose of it was for, but I don't think it was anything that somebody who's,
It lacks a certain professional.
yes.
He's a dude from Clemson with a picture of his sailboat. I mean, is that what, yeah.
There are
And
two
the matching
pictures.
family shirts.
Yes, there are two pictures of him in some sort of sports, almost showing up the body pose, so.
And yet rhetorically,
That,
it's a good move.
Yeah.
I mean,
Honest audience.
If he's job hunting,
it's gonna work for him. I mean,
or an
I'm saying that.
advertising firm, I think of a couple of guys sitting around who own an advertising firm are gonna hire him.
So he's a slick package and it
Yeah.
does.
But I don't think we're evaluating any of that, actually.
No, I don't think we are either.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking that. I was like, 'cause if that's the case, our FFL portfolios are gonna, you all gonna think they're horrible.
No, I hear ya.
No, well, but they look similar because they had they made it their own because it's not in purposes of you're going to get a job. It's more of talk about your college experience.
Right.
So I think it depends on the viewpoint you evaluate the portfolio from. So, yeah, I mean.
I didn't think it was a bad, that's the thing, I didn't think it was a bad portfolio from, like, if I were doing it, if this were supposed to be a portfolio that was analyzing a research class, well then no, but I think the purpose behind what's going on, it makes a big
Yeah.
difference in how we view it.
So I gave him high score, Clemson high scores for the most part.
Pretty much did
Oh, I'm the high scorer for Sam though.
Are you?
Oh, yeah?
Looking at
I
her
mean, you have
writing.
to teach me how to do
Easy.
this. I don't know.
Although,
I struggle.
I mean, I'm not saying
Well,
that
it'll take more
I
time
had
than
fours
just 15 minutes.
anywhere.
If you're really trying to,
All right, we'll see.
like, I can't.
for anybody.
I need to see.
Right.
We can.
Thank you, you
I
too.
think Sam, I'm giving Sam like praise for her conclusions because it's obvious
Yeah.
that she has been reflexive about what she's learned.
Yeah.
And
Okay, here's
It's
where
hard to do
I'm
in 15
lost.
minutes though.
Oh.
Here's where I'm lost, and maybe this
I'm ruining your stuff.
No, no, you're good. And this sounds like a very basic, ignorant question, but I don't really understand what comprehensive and holistic mean in this space.
yeah.
Do we need to push the button?
Oh, it's fine, it's still recording.
Oh, okay.
No, maybe we do.
I'm trying to remember what I said.
But my point being, does the whole entire thing have to be this, or can we see it, by looking at the entire thing, can we see it in one piece? That's where I'm stuck.
Yeah, because the parts of me where I'm wowed by comparatively Sam's writing versus Clemson's writing, that gave me evidence for certain things. But the overall presentation, so I guess that is a question we need to address, is how much is the package, the presentational portions that are, some of these are add-ons, I guess, to, I don't know.
Well, I'm like,
Because I'm not going to set up a requirement for my students to put photos, for example. They may incorporate some images into some of their work samples, but they're not going to do this,
Yeah.
I'm taking, hanging out on my sailboat thing.
and
or
even what
dollar
Joyce
store.
just said, I'm sorry, even what Joyce just said about conclusions. So I had that same thought, but that ended up scoring the person lower on conclusions because there wasn't a conclusion for the entire portfolio. versus there were conclusions for the
Yeah,
papers.
her conclusions and her papers were good, so I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I can give her some points
Right, but so I gave her a 1.
Yeah.
I was like, but there's nothing that wraps up the portfolio itself,
And
so.
this is how, like I said, this is how we've ended up with wildly different numbers, because
Right,
we're,
yeah.
we're going through this process in the BLS program.
Yeah.
Every semester they sit down and evaluate the SSC 400 portfolios to see if we're getting out what we want to get out. And I've looked at the evaluations before and went, how?
Yeah.
How did we get a 1 and a 5 off the same
Yeah.
portfolio? And this is exactly how,
Yeah.
because people don't know what they're evaluating. So if nothing else is an illustrative for that,
Well, and
you know.
this is, I guess this is part of the norming process that we go through where we,
Or the calibrate.
Yeah.
They were trying to distinguish between norming and calibrating the other day, but
okay.
I don't know.
yeah, I'm not
Who knows?
sure, but thinking about how we want to read these.
So and Chantel, correct us if we're wrong. Is it okay if we just agree on a way to read them, or do we have to, like, if we're all in agreement in this
Mhm.
particular project, can we justify that? Can we agree on that, move forward, evaluate and justify that in our write-up on how we graded them? Is that good enough?
One more time.
Okay, so,
I
yeah,
I
no,
lost
you're
you.
fine, not really sure that I'm clearly articulating it. So what we're struggling with is, so for example, Joyce said, pick on the conclusion piece, she said, she gave it a high score because the papers had good conclusions.
Mhm.
And yet at the same time, I gave it a low score because there was no conclusion of the portfolio.
Mhm.
So we're not sure if we're evaluating the individual pieces within, or if we're evaluating the portfolio and its presentation. So if we make a decision, we
Mhm.
say we are gonna look at it, as long as we see it somewhere in the portfolio, then we'll give it credit. If we make that decision, is that okay for the purposes of this project? Or is that a Roy question?
There may be a Roy question because he was very specific in his instructions, but I'm under the I'm under the impression that if, for one, if anything were to be left blank, I'm guessing it would be ranked as 0, because he did say rank them anywhere from 0 to 4. So if there were any categories that were left blank, I guess it would just automatically be assumed or read off as 0, since there's nothing that you can really compare it to in the document. But I could ask him that for sure, about the justification based on.
Well, and I'm just thinking long-term, so when we finish this project and we turn it in to whomever gets it,
Yeah.
if we say, here's what we found, here is how we evaluated it. And that might be good enough.
Yeah, because that concerns me if the work product doesn't meet, because according to this, the score of 0 does not meet minimum standard.
Right.
Which at that point means that it is, if you look at the levels, A level, B level, C level, D level, it would be considered an F level, correct? E, F level.
So can we put that?
A 0 needs
So-
to be different than
A
an
0, so if it just doesn't have it in there because, let's say they weren't required to do those pieces, that's completely different than that was the requirement and that was what they had to meet and they did not meet it, right? So that, it just concerns me if we start giving 0s to areas that they don't meet because they were never required to do that in the first place.
Maybe just not applicable, and then
Yeah,
kind of
so maybe
justify
if we
from
just
there.
reterm
Yeah,
that.
NA.
And yet Brandy brings up a good point, we're gonna need the assignment before we can grade this.
Yeah, like the prompt,
But
yeah, and
we
I
don't have
wrote
the
on
assignment
here,
here.
the prompt makes a huge difference. I mean,
Yeah.
seeing how they had to have it structured makes a huge difference. So, for instance, you may not have your students doing photos, or that may not be something that they're required to do. Like for our class, they haven't, like for my class, they have an entire photo project that they have to do.
Yeah.
So if there's gotta be pictures of dogs, somebody has a picture of Tupac, somebody has a picture of, but they
Yeah.
have to talk about why is this picture important, what is the relevance, they have to give a caption, so some kind of thought process behind it. You could utilize that for critical thinking. It may not be as in-depth because you can't do it, you may not be able to use the writing communication, but
Mhm.
you can see some level there of how they interpreted the picture. So, I mean, I think you see varying ways of doing things.
The interesting question too is for our portfolios, as part of our departmental requirement, we make students put the assignment sheets in because we go through the process every so often, every few years perhaps, of evaluating on a departmental level. So you're going to see my students'
Right.
assignment sheets, but
Bless you.
Yeah, but I haven't,
But what
I
if-
haven't done that.
but what if other,
Yeah.
so what if
Yeah,
other,
we haven't been doing that, we probably should. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't, wait, there's a whole category in influence of context and assumptions, without the context, we can't.
Well, the assignment sheets, well, because don't we have to post those in Blackboard?
Yeah,
I want
we-
to say
for our
so, yes,
stuff,
in the
we're supposed to.
syllabi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but,
for
I
the
mean, is that,
other
do
stuff
we
that
wanna
we're
go
using
back
for
to?
norming.
No, not really, we don't. I mean, just being honest, we really don't. We really don't, but yeah, I mean, that's something Dawn and I were talking about. We were trying to figure out, can we just go ahead and write them down and put them up and then not have to worry about it later, but, you know, you might change things along the way, so.
Sure.
But yeah,
Locked myself out of my office again.
I don't even have anything on Sam. I'm still,
I got Sam, but not our.